I used to be in a really, really bad place. I had struggled with mental health issues from the time I was in middle school, mostly depression and anxiety. You know, the usual culprits. I had been working in a Starbucks as a barista. The Starbucks was actually inside of a Target. You would think it would be bad, but it was pretty nice. Anyway, I dated this one guy who may have been an actual sociopath. He had some serious problems. I haven't spoken to him in a few years now, and I don't plan on reaching out anytime soon. Trust me, you'll see why in just a minute. He actually found me out back one day. I was behind the store. I said I was going on break, but I really just needed to go and cry for a little while. I was feeling really overwhelmed and depressed. I just didn't have anything to look forward to in my life at that time. I remember looking up at him. I could barely see him through the tears in my eyes. He started talking to me, and he really comforted me. I told him that I thought about ending my life and was severely depressed. At the time, I thought he was just a really sympathetic person, willing to help someone down on their luck. But now I know the truth. He saw a struggling person who would be easy to abuse, and that's exactly what he did to me. I vividly remember him wiping my tears away, right off of my cheek. I was so touched, and his name was Mike. He really got me. It wasn't long before we had exchanged numbers and started dating. It was really great at first. That honeymoon part of a relationship was so great, but the honeymoon phase doesn't last forever, and when I started to see him for who he really was, I got afraid. I noticed that he wore a mask, and I don't mean like a costume. He would pretend to be someone that he wasn't. He literally faked a personality. There were a few times that I was at his apartment and he would just start acting really weird. It was like his true self came out, and it was horrifying. He was so mean that I honestly can't even put it into words. He really did enjoy making me suffer. I remember him telling me that I wasn't good enough and that I needed to lose weight and read more and work harder and a million other things. He told me everyone in my life thought that I was pathetic. He said so many things like that, and I honestly couldn't stand it. It was like he found that negative voice in the back of my head and put it on speaker. The worst I ever felt about myself was when I was with him, and I totally let it all happen, because no matter how mean he ever was to me, a part of me secretly believed that he would be the only person to ever be with me, that I wasn't worth anyone better than him. Yeah, it was a really dark time. It wasn't too long into our relationship that he convinced me to move in with him. He actually had a nice place, but it was kind of far from my job and my parents. Because of the move, I had to drive almost half an hour one way to Starbucks. Of course he didn't care. He never did about things like that. He gradually isolated me from everyone in my life. He did it one by one. He started with some of my friends, and I might mention that I wasn't very close to them to begin with. But any contact with anyone other than him was a threat, so he would tell me that so-and-so person that I speak to once in a while actually hates me, but sometimes he was more abrasive about it. There was one time when he grabbed my phone right out of my hand and blocked my coworker's phone number. He was really threatening about it too. I knew that if I ever unblocked him, that he might actually do something to me. Things started escalating to the point that even I recognized that they were out of control. I knew if things continued down this path, he was going to kill me or I was going to end up taking my own life. It really was that bad. I won't bore you with every little horrible story, but he broke my stuff, cheated on me. He even joked about the fact that he cheated on me, said I should be happy he's with me at all when there are so many other great women out there, and all kinds of stuff like that. The day I realized that I had to get out was really important. I didn't really have anywhere to go, though. Mike basically forced me to break off contact with everyone, and he regularly checked my phone to make sure I wasn't speaking with someone who I wasn't supposed to. I reached out to my mom while I was at work, borrowed one of my coworkers' phones and gave her a call. It was really nice to hear her voice. I explained as much of the situation as I could, and she said she completely understood and that she was more than happy to let me move back home. That was a really touching moment for me. I walked out that night because Mike was out. I was able to pack my stuff and leave without ever having to say anything. He probably would have gotten me to stay somehow, said the right words, made me feel like everything was going to be okay, the way he always does. He didn't appreciate the fact that I was gone. He was mad. He started showing up at my job a few times a week. He would always try to talk to me, convince me that things could get better. He said that he would change and be nicer to me, but I knew that he was just lying to me. I knew he just wanted me back under his thumb. I ignored everything he said, and that seemed to work for a little while. It didn't stop him. There was no way that I was going with him again. This is where things get crazy, though. He really wanted me back. He showed up at my work one day. I actually happened to be on break. I was walking around Target and just killing time, honestly. As I was walking, I saw him looking through some of the glass near the Starbucks section of the store, and my heart dropped. He looked livid, like really worked up and violently kind of mad. I stopped and just stood there for a moment. I didn't know what to do. He turned around and saw me, and we made eye contact, and the only thing I could think to do was run. My body spun around faster than I ever had before. I ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction, and I knew that he was chasing me. It was actually weird how I got out of the situation. There is an employee door that you need a card key to get through. The Starbucks employees had them too for some reason. I think there was a glitch in the system, but either way, I was far away enough from him that I got through it and closed the door behind me. One of the Target employees asked me if I was okay. As bad as the situation was, I honestly didn't want to make a scene. I told him I was fine and just needed a minute to take a break. I sat there for about 15 minutes and left. Mike was gone, and that was the last time I saw him. I'm not sure why he hasn't contacted me since. I'm just glad he hasn't, though. He was responsible for the worst part of my life, and honestly, I'm lucky to have gotten out of that situation alive. Wherever he is, I just hope he isn't doing the same thing to another poor girl out there. I had a seasonal job at Target last year. Every year they bring in new people during the seasonal times to help with all of the chaos of the spending season. It's pretty standard. Just about everyone was doing this. It just happened by chance that I was doing it at Target. I think it's actually funny. I don't think I've ever actually been to Target until that job. But anyway, it was actually a night shift position. I would come in and start working at around 4 a.m., and that was one of the crucial times to get stocked up on stuff for the big shopping rush that day. Now, the way we did it was we would get a shipment off of a truck, and all the supplies would go onto the back. We did that as fast as possible so the truck driver could get on with his next stop. Those guys were always in a rush, and once we got the stuff in the back, it was up to our team to get it all organized and stocked. And that was all fine and dandy, pretty standard procedure. Now, there was normally a good number of people who worked this shift with me, normally between 4 and 5 of us, with the manager somewhere else doing whatever else managers do, but here was the situation. The layout of the store was a little weird. We had so much room in the warehouse area for all the supplies, but sometimes it would be too much, like drastically overflowing. And we had this other room to put some of the stuff we just couldn't fit anywhere else. It was a weird situation because that overflow room was not very big. I think it used to be someone's office. I don't know what happened there, and I don't really care either. That was the job. It was a true nightmare to organize the stuff in that overflow room. It was a really tight working space because it would normally be 2 people in there doing that, and the rest of the team would be outside. This room was kind of secluded as well. It was just kind of out of the way and didn't make sense to be a storage spot. Again, not my decision, just what I was told to do. It was one of these early mornings that I had to work in that overflow room with a guy I didn't know that well. He never said very much, and he looked a little sketchy. I'd actually seen him walk off the premises a few times after getting a text message. That was really weird. It was never for very long either. It was like he got a text message and went outside to take a smoke break or something. No one ever said anything, though, so he just continued to do it. Honestly, none of us really cared that much. I didn't mention we came in at 4 in the morning, right? Well, This one morning that we were working in the overflow room, something a little strange happened. He got a text message and went outside like usual. I asked him where he was going, and he just said he'll be right back. He left before I could say anything else, but I noticed he dropped something as he went out. It fell on the floor, and I went over to pick it up. I could tell you exactly what it was, but it looked like a clear Ziploc bag of herbs. Honestly, they probably weren't herbs at all, but being really tired and overworked, I assumed he was a gardener and he was carrying his herbs around. I know how stupid it sounds. I have a lot of friends that are really into gardening, and I guess I just assumed the best case scenario. When he came back, he seemed like he was in a rush. He was looking around frantically. I told him he dropped his herbs. I pointed to them on a table in the room, and that was when he got really aggressive with me. He asked me if I thought it was funny, and that was when it dawned on me that he wasn't walking around with lavender in his pocket all day. It also dawned on me that he was probably selling while he was working this shift. That would explain why he would randomly go outside every once in a while. He threatened to kill me if I said anything to anyone, and I was honestly scared to death. I didn't know what to do. Looking back, I probably should have told my manager and called the police right then, but I never really had to deal with anyone that was a criminal or anything of that sort. Of course, I didn't say anything to anyone, but now every time that I saw him, he gave me a weird look. We'll just call him David for anonymity's sake. And that wasn't his real name, but it'll work. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I started to observe David a little more closely. I paid a lot more attention to what he was doing and what he was looking at and how he was behaving. And after that time, I realized a few things about him. Firstly, he was definitely a drug user himself. I couldn't tell you what, but my guess is that it was something pretty hardcore. He would talk to himself like a crazy guy once in a while, and other times he would just completely zone out like he was in a different planet. The other thing that I noticed about him was that he was very unstable. Sometimes he would get really upset over very minor stuff. There was one time he screamed at the top of his lungs because his shoe was untied, and other ridiculous things like that. Now, while all of this was going on, I was still living my life. I still went for runs at the local park, and I made YouTube videos in my free time, just for fun. I tried to forget about the whole situation with David. That was until I saw David at the park where I always ran. He was sitting on the bench staring at me dead on. I stopped mid-step. That was the scariest realization ever, because it meant that he was stalking me, and I didn't know what his intentions were. I didn't know how long he'd been doing it or why. I just knew that I was in danger. I kept running and played it off like I didn't notice him. But oh boy, how could I not? Then there was one morning where it all went down. I showed up a little earlier than usual. I was always on early bird and I just hated being late. I was there about an hour before my shift started, must have been about 3 or so. I was chilling in the parking lot listening to a podcast on my phone, and that was when I noticed someone pull up behind me. I parked kind of far away from the store to not take up parking for the customers throughout the day. I just thought it was unusual for someone to park so close to me when there were spots everywhere else. My heart sank. The person behind me turned on their brights, and that was when I knew it was David. My fight or flight kicked in. I turned my car off and sprinted to the store as fast as I possibly could. I knew the employee would be open and I would be able to get to safety there. David started driving after me, like trying to run me over. He probably would have gotten to me too, but there was the spot where it was a line of trees in the parking lot. I ran to the other side of the trees when I noticed that he was driving and he couldn't really do anything after that. I got inside and screamed that I needed help. Surprisingly enough, my manager was there. I explained the situation to her and we called the police. She locked the employee entrance and we waited until the police gave us the okay. Obviously, David had booked it. The cops couldn't find him either. He wasn't at his apartment. Apparently he gave the wrong address when he applied to work there. I guess they don't check the seasonal workers very thoroughly at Target. Hopefully they do now. And that was the story of how I almost got messed up working at Target last year, and if you're wondering, I don't plan on applying again this year. Target was my favorite place to go shopping. I'm sad to say I don't think I can never go back there, though. Sometimes when you have such a bad experience, it will ruin the love you had for a place or a store altogether, and that's what happened to me. It all started when I graduated college. I was a psychology major and I struggled to find a job. I live in a mid-sized city and there just wasn't anything appealing to me. There weren't any jobs in my field that I could get. The only psychology job I could even find wanted 10 years of experience. So I had to take whatever job I could get. I ended up working at some funky call center, and I say funky because it really was a complete dumpster fire every single day. The managers had no idea what was going on. My coworkers were some of the weirdest people I'd ever seen. Most of them didn't have a college education either, which made me feel really bad about myself. I had some really low confidence during this time, and I felt like a failure. I still lived with my parents and had a massive amount of student debt, and I was working at a call center making minimum wage. I had also let myself go during the last few months of my senior year in college. I was really stressed out trying to pass. I just didn't have time to make salad or go for runs anymore. I was feeling really down there for a bit, and this is where James comes in. He was a really weird guy that worked at the call center too. He had a goofy-looking mustache and was a bit of a creep. I definitely saw him checking me out a few times, and I even saw him look at other girls too. A little pervy, but I couldn't expect anything less from a place like this that I worked at. Oddly enough, James was the only guy at this place that was ever nice to me. Everyone else was so miserable to be there. James had been hired a couple of weeks before I got the job there, so I guess it just didn't have enough time to make me and James completely miserable yet. There was one time when I went out for a smoke break. James joined me and started flirting with me. He definitely had his problems, but there was something about getting a little bit of attention that did kind of make me feel special. I was always a very introverted person, and I hadn't had a boyfriend in over 2 years. It felt nice to be noticed. It wasn't long before we exchanged numbers and started talking a little bit outside of work. There were a few weeks there that I kept trying to get him to shave his mustache. I told him he would look a lot better. It took about 3 weeks to finally get through to him, but when he did, I was surprised. He was actually a really handsome guy under that caterpillar, and that was when I made up my mind. If he made a move on me, I wasn't going to say no. He never made a move on me, though, and I was surprised because I was sending some pretty strong signals for him to do so. He just never did. Not even over text messages or anything. All he would ever do was flirt. It wasn't very long into that situation that I gave up on him. I figured he didn't like me. I mean, honestly, what else was I supposed to think? I downloaded Tinder like everyone else. I knew my situation was bad, and I secretly fantasized about hooking up with some rich guy. I didn't find a buff millionaire, but I did find a really nice guy eventually. We went on a few dates and started going out together regularly, and I really liked him. We're still together, by the way. But this is where things got weird with James. He started acting differently. He started doing more and more inappropriate things. I was friends with James on Facebook, and when I changed my status to an in a relationship, he did one of those emoji reactions, and he put an angry face. I remember seeing it and rolling my eyes. Typical men, I thought. They don't want you until you have someone else. Now, something James would always do with me is send slightly naked pictures. It wasn't like full frontal or anything like that, but he would take racy photos of himself getting out of the shower or changing and things like that. That was okay when I was single, but he just didn't stop. And these new pics were much more revealing, if you know what I mean. And I kept telling him that I was in a relationship and he couldn't do this anymore. He just wouldn't listen. He always said that he forgot, and I knew he was doing it intentionally. Things also got really awkward at work. There were quite a few things that he would do that were just freaky. For example, pens started disappearing from my desk. I didn't think anything of it at first, just that I was being clumsy. But one day I happened to walk by James's desk and notice all of my pens. He also followed me outside every time I went on a smoke break. He always played it off like he wasn't doing anything, but it was so obvious to everyone. Well, it was around the 6-month mark of me working at that funky call center. I had my performance review and I got a raise. I got an extra $1 an hour, which I was pretty happy about. I had a few $100 in savings and decided to treat myself to my favorite store, Target. I remember making a self-congratulatory post on Facebook about it. I even mentioned that I was going to treat myself to some new sheets from Target. I remember getting comments from some of my friends and former classmates. They all congratulated me, and I was really excited. Sure, I had a stupid job, but I was making the best of my situation. I remember getting to Target at about 6 or 7 on a Friday night. I went alone. I walked into the store and went over to the bedding aisle. I really wanted to pick out the best sheets for me. I am a little OCD about fabric and how things feel, so I was running my hands across the sheets to find the one that I liked the best. That was when something unexpected happened. I felt a kiss on my neck. I had been so wrapped up in feeling sheets that I didn't even notice who was behind me. I immediately thought it was my boyfriend. I mean, who else would randomly kiss me in public, right? Well, you guessed it. It was James. I turned around after he kissed me, and I was smiling. But my giddiness turned to disgust when I saw that it was him. My stomach dropped, and I wanted to scream, but I just couldn't bring myself to do anything. More of me was in shock than anything else. I know I must have looked so repulsed, but that didn't stop him from pinning me up against the aisle rack and continuing to kiss me. He shoved his entire tongue down my throat. It was honestly disgusting. This probably went on for about 3 or 4 seconds before I finally snapped out of it. I pulled my head away and slapped him across the face as hard as I could. I told him that I never wanted to see him again. I fell down onto my back and I just sat there telling him to please leave me alone. He stood there, though, looking down at me, smiling. James was a really freaky guy. He started getting on top of me and kissing me again, and that was when I finally screamed at the top of my lungs. Someone who must have been in an aisle over or two overheard and came running. It was a man who looked like he was in his 30s. He ripped James off of me and threw him against the wall. After that, James took off. The man was really nice to me. He helped me up and made sure I was okay. He asked if I wanted to call the police, and I was so shocked I just told him no in the moment. And that wouldn't be the last time that I saw James. We still work at the same call center, and my God, it's pretty awkward. I know he still creeps on my Facebook, and he looks at me all the time. I'm honestly not sure what to do about it. I haven't even told my boyfriend about what happened, and honestly, I'm kind of afraid to. But I seriously might have to, one of these days. I used to love Valentine's Day. I used to love all the cutesy displays and Valentine's-themed stock items we put out in the Walmart I worked at. And I used to love picking out something special for my boyfriend after planning a little date night with him. But we're not together anymore, and I'm not much of a romantic these days either. In fact, I dread February 14th coming around each year because it reminds me of one of the single worst moments in my entire life. So like I said, I worked at Walmart when this all happened, and it actually happened in the store too. I loved the decorating and checking out the romantic stock that we'd gotten in that year, but I usually tried to get Valentine's Day off. Or if I was working it, I'd trade shifts with a coworker. But this one year, I can't get off, and no one would trade with me, so I was stuck working 8 till 5 on Valentine's Day. But it's no big loss. I can wait for my presents, and me and my boyfriend arranged to do something after work anyway, so I took it on the chin. Right after I finished my lunch break, I happened to be walking by one of the Valentine's displays when I see this older guy staring at some of the items. I thought it was the cutest thing ever. This sweet older gentleman looking to pick his wife up something romantic. Or maybe he had his eye on someone in the nursing home he was at. Either way, it was super adorable to me. So I saddled up to the old guy and asked him who the lucky lady is. He's all startled for a moment, again kinda super cute, and has to compose himself before he gives me his answer. There was no one special in his life. He was just something of an old romantic, and seeing cutesy displays like ours on Valentine's Day made him long for lost loves of his. I remember he said that. I then asked if he had his eye on anyone new, and he starts talking in a way I found kind of confusing at first. Like I thought I may have misunderstood, maybe lost the context a little, but after a minute of him just sort of babbling, I realize he's not making any sense at all. He keeps skipping from thought to thought, just like a stream of broken consciousness coming out of him. It was right about then that it hit me that he wasn't all there. That was also about the time that I realized he wasn't that old either. I mean, all his hair was gray. He had like an old man jumper on, but he was so animated when he talked. He seemed sort of spry, like full of nervous energy, and at a push, I'd say he was in his mid-50s. But something about him just seemed off, and I was starting to think that initiating conversation hadn't been the best idea on my part. I wish him luck with who the lucky lady turns out to be, then slowly make a move to walk away. But he stops me, not with a word. I mean, he physically stops me from walking away. He didn't grab me or anything at first. It was just his fingers gently half wrapping around my wrist, but it was enough to really put me on edge. Then he asked me in a way that seemed both extremely childlike and extremely sinister, both at the same time. "Will you be my Valentine?" It was so surreal that initially I thought he had to be joking. Like no sane person would ask anyone that in a serious way, not like that anyway. So I just sort of laugh it off before apologizing and letting him know that I was seeing someone, and right as I do, I try to pull my wrist out of his hand. He tightens it, wraps his entire fist around my wrist, and squeezes. I just froze for a moment. In almost 2 years of working at that Walmart, I've never had so much as an issue with a customer. Maybe it's because I'm short and blonde, maybe it's because I'm just lucky. And because that whole interaction went from 0 to 100 so fast, and given my total lack of experience in any kind of conflict management, I just had no idea what to do. So I froze. The guy starts turning red in the face, and he continues to squeeze my wrist as hard as he could. There are veins bulging out of his neck. He's trembling so hard his eyes are starting to water, and he is strong. Like really freaking strong. Then what he did next haunted me for months afterwards. He gets his face right in mine, while I'm absolutely frozen in terror, and starts singing. He tried to keep his voice down, but he couldn't get the words out without his words trembling from whatever weird rage fit he was going through. After 2 lines, I just start screeching for help, but as soon as I start making any noise, one of his hands shoots up around my throat and pushes me back hard against a shelf. And when he starts squeezing, I stop being able to scream. Then, one of his other hands goes somewhere else, somewhere I really wish he hadn't put it. But when he did, I finally found the strength to really fight back. But it was over moments later. Some other customer had come barreling down the aisle when he heard my scream and tackled the guy so hard that he almost floored me too. And if the guy seemed crazy before he got tackled, afterward he turned into a full-blown lunatic. He actually bit the guy who first got him down, and if it wasn't for security showing up as quick as they did, I think he might have actually gotten free. He was legitimately frothing at the mouth by the time the cops showed up. I've never seen a person look like that before. That guy was more animal than man by that point. And the fallout was huge. Walmart sent me to some trauma management thing that didn't help at all, and sent emails around to the other associates promising they'd do better with security and stuff, but it was all just for show. I gave statements to the police too, and for a while, it looked like I'd have to go to court to testify against the guy that assaulted me. But as it turned out, he was found unfit to stand trial, and instead of going to real prison, he ended up in some state hospital somewhere else. When it was all said and done, I just tried to get over it. It was one of the more horrific moments of my life, sure, but I refused to let it define me. And for a long while, I worked on my overall mental health and particularly my sense of self-esteem. I thought I was good after that. I thought I was fixed, so there was no way of me anticipating what would happen when I met a friend at this 50s diner that was our favorite place to eat. We're just sitting there, conversation on hold while we eat, and this song comes on the old jukebox. Until the lyrics started, everything was fine, but then these two girls started singing some words that I thought I'd gotten out of my head completely. I know you belong to somebody new, but tonight you belong to me. I recognized it instantly from the weird little changes in pitch in the girls' voices, but it was the exact same song the guy in Walmart had sang before he grabbed me. I know I caused a bit of a scene when I got up and fast walked out of there, with my friend calling after me, but I honestly didn't care. I couldn't breathe while that song was in my ears. I just couldn't be there. I suppose trauma is weird like that. No matter how much you think you have it under control, it's still there, bubbling away just beneath the surface. But I do work at it, and I managed to neutralize how that creepy old song made me feel too. I mean, it took a while, but I managed it. Like I said, I'm not going to let what happened define me, and I'll wear my wounds with pride. But Valentine's Day is most definitely ruined for me.